Hi there, yeah, great and glorious, and you seem to be famous one day, Nick Dutchy here again. Sorry, the title of this video is quite so polemic, and you might even argue rather extreme. But essentially, what I have to say does not just relate to Christianity, but does relate to all religions, whether they're organized or whether they're not organized. Now, YouTube is wonderful, you know, there's plenty of different ideas out there. This is like an academic resource, a study resource, and an entertainment service all rolled into one. But it's also a place where ideas and stupidity tend to mix with great frequency. If we have a look at Christianity on one side of things, and the way that Christianity is expressed on YouTube, the very fact that it is expressed on YouTube is in fact incredibly blasphemous against Christianity. Christians do believe that the Bible is the literal Word of God. But there is a statement in the book of Corinthians which says, let those who are vile continue to be vile, let those who are filthy continue to be filthy, which essentially means don't evangelize, which essentially means that anyone who is evangelizing is going against the literal Word of God breathed, which would essentially mean that Christian fundamentalism, Christianity being promoted is in fact against the Word of God. One could even therefore say that it is somehow sinful. So essentially all of the Christians, creationists, and all the rest of it who are promoting their faith here on YouTube are, if their religion is correct in their eyes, are all going to go to hell in a handcart in accordance with the words of their Creator. You know, Christian fundamentalism is in fact wrong in the eyes of Christianity, which is peculiar. But this leads us to wonder, what is the purpose of the various books of religion? What is the purpose of the various stories of the various religions? To state that something which is believed is in fact a fact or knowledge is completely incorrect. It's completely illogical, and it's plain wrong. If you know something, you don't have to believe it. And if you believe something, you are stating that you don't know it. You've got to know the meanings of the words that you're using. But the books of religion and the stories of religion are there to hold people together. That is their primary purpose and function, and that is where it stops. The stories of Jesus Christ are there to hold the Christians together. That's what it does. You might say for a moment that the stories of religion are there to define or steer people's morality or people's moral law, but as I've already pointed out in the earlier part of this video, the moral law within Christianity says that you should not be doing evangelizing, so what are you doing promoting your religion here on YouTube? You know, think about it. If you wish to escape the self-contradiction of, let's say, in this particular example, Christianity, and move to another religion, you'll be moving from one set of predefined self-contradictory ideas to another set of predefined self-contradictory ideas. So the angle of I am going to choose to believe this or I'm going to choose to believe that is just like making a statement. I am going to choose to accept some things which are true for which I have no evidence and which are probably not true. Now this can be useful to develop for yourself a certain structure of ideas or structure of identity, and you know, that's fine as far as it can go. But as time passes by, you suddenly realize that all these definitions of identity and belief start to melt into oblivion. They become pointless, meaningless. And you start to realize that just being a human being is basically enough. And you can take some of the wisdom and some of the morality from here, there, and everywhere and use that to build up your identity. I see religion more as a way to maintain one's sanity in a world which is becoming increasingly more insane. But when it's taken to extremes, it becomes a way of generating insanity where once there could have been sanity and stability. Now let's take another example of someone who moves away from all orthodox religion and into something more freeform, more do-it-yourself, maybe a New Age religion or concept in which more or less total freedom is allowed. And let's say through your effort, you either have some experiences or you get your hands on some small quantities of information, and from that you start to develop some beliefs or models of the world, some theories. And from that it becomes solidified and crystallized almost to the point of seeming like knowledge, to the point whereby you say you know these things are true, but in reality you just believe them. What would have happened is you would have just developed your own religious structure, which in its own right is probably not too bad. But also bear in mind that it would also be suggestive and symptomatic that you would have not moved past the psychological structure, the level of growth of someone who is heavily into or a fundamentalist of any other religion. So essentially I'm tempted to say psychosis remains the same, but it's just the labels which have changed, rather than moving on to a state of realizing that being an individual, a human individual who is trying to fit in with society within certain limits and is trying to act in a way in which is appropriate and reasonably disciplined, could be thrown out the window. This stage which I'm talking about, namely seeing yourself as just an individual and not needing to have any labels applied to yourself, no religious titles, seems to be very close to what certain writers call the ultimate level of spiritual development. And it's just incredibly normal. And ironically, it seems to be what a lot of the atheists have already done. So in this alleged state of spirituality or spiritual growth, is it possible to have theistic concepts? Bottom line, yes. Do you have to see them as true? Definitely not. Can you continue to have supernatural experiences? You can continue to try and develop them and then criticize them afterwards. Do I personally define myself as being a highly evolved spiritual being? No, because that's a definition. And if it's a definition, it's a limitation, and it will be a belief about what I am. And if it's a belief about what I am, I will be reverting back to the same problems as someone who is of a religion. And I don't want to do that. Okay, just a few more things for you to think about. Bye for now.